Kia ora, koutou I whanau whanui ko Shayne Galloway toko ingoa. I was asked to come and speak about social science, and I really didn't know what to expect. So I put together some thoughts and some research, and it turns out it follows on quite nicely from what Rasmus has just done. Before I get started, you need to notice a couple things about me. I'm a recovering academic. I am an independent. I'm an independent researcher, and so my background there is I did my master's degree in recreation resource management with a trail, and I did my doctorate in leisure behavior and adventure education of what happens on the trail. So that's my perspective, or shapes my perspective a little bit. I've just turned 17 in Aotearoa, so loving that. And I've become very focused on place, meaning, and attachment in the recreational context. The last two things is particularly in reference to what I'm going to talk about today. In my life, I'm a human-powered recreationist with some caveats for the paddle, the boat, and the bike, as well as a rope now and then. The other thing you need to know about me is that for 16 of those years, I've been partnered up with Marie Baker Galloway, who's a resource management lawyer and has had a great deal to do with preserving flows and the fish and recreational values on these rivers, and reading through the submissions to water conservation order cases or district council hearings about development or extraction have shaped what I'm going to say today. I'm going to bring together braided river research and provide my perspective on social science and recreation in this context. I'm going to talk about recreation ecology and social psychology, and then I'm going to talk about ecological psychology, which isn't on the slide, hopefully. And I'm going to talk about affordance and behavior setting within those contexts, then hopefully get through the rest of it. What's the problem? Benefits of recreation drive the participation and engagement in recreation. And these include, and this has actually been validated scientifically by Bratman et al. Very recently. And the three main themes that they found in all of the research that's been done on effect and recreation is that it has a great deal to say about positive affect, happiness, social well-being, positive social interaction, et cetera, et cetera. And then it also has to do with improved sleep and stress disruption, stress reduction, which has an impact on mental illness and depression, which we have a great problem with. And then also, evidence suggests that opportunities for these nature experiences are decreasing. Compared with that, in New Zealand, we also have increasing use by residents and visitors, increasingly constrained maintenance budgets, and the evolving manifestation of the human drive to explore. And for this, in New Zealand, we could talk specifically about jet boating, pack rafting, and the e-mountain bike as examples of this. And the new initiatives have had great effect, but aren't often followed through with funds for maintaining them. And the cycle trail is a very good example of that. And I think we're in the midst of a post-COVID boom. The Queenstown Trail Trust cycle count, the track counters, more than quadrupled in their use when we were let out of our houses during COVID. And that seems to be continuing in some areas. So I don't call myself a recreation ecologist because in the past, and I think largely still today, it's about site treatment. It's about erosion, compaction, non-native species damage, and litter, which is a lot of what you guys are focused on. But it really hasn't been my interest. Although it has produced some interesting categorizations, such as the ROS, Recreation Opportunity Spectrum, or Limits of Acceptable Change. And it's had a broad influence on recreation management, but not as an ecology, for example. We're just not considered part of it. And there are reasons for that, but I'm not going to go into them now. But back in 1982, I was very happy to find this from 1982. which shows, I believe that's probably Mosley, standing in a stream or in the river, measuring a riffle, because that's where the jet boaters told him that they could just get through at that level. We could leave recreation and ecology behind because we've now got this thing, which is the new and improved ecosystem services. And I've got the website here and all the acronyms and everything. We configured this as nature's contributions to people. New Zealand is a signatory to this effort, and it defines those contributions as all the benefits and detriments that people get from their relationships with the rest of the world. Just to clarify, this is not us regulating the environment. This is the environment regulating itself. These are all the cycles that you all know so much about, and what it can produce. I came across this very, very recent study, which has taken all these ideas that I've been struggling with in independent ways, and it combines them in this lovely model. And we're talking about a meaningful place. So it's a geographic location. It's to which immediately perceived as well as socially constructed meanings are ascribed and evaluative attachments are tied. So you've got three pots of data. The meanings, which are immediately perceived and socially constructed. You've got the attachment, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is dependence and identity, and then you've got the physical environment. But that's a bit big for recreation. It's over here. So I've brought this in. I've focused it on recreation to the exclusion of everything else. A district in a commissioner in an RMA hearing once accused me of being biased in favor of recreation, and he was right, and I agree with him. So when we're thinking about recreation, bring this model to it, meaningful places for recreation present recognizable affordances from an activity, and within which participants can engage in their chosen pursuit, bounded by standing patterns of behavior, and to which individual and social meanings are ascribed and evaluated attachments are tied. Pretty straightforward. Well, what does all that mean? So ecological psychology is where this all comes from and what it's tied to. And ecological psychology is about perception action cycles, and how the individuals perceive their environment in terms of its affordances or what it offers them in terms of action. And I believe that the ecological psychologists have just lifted this from ecology, so it might sound a bit familiar in a lot of ways. Gibson in '79 defined affordance, and this is important because it's not the same definition you'll find in the dictionary. It's what the environment provides the person, he used the word animal, offers the person and what it provides or furnishes either for good or ill. I like that a lot. It's value free. It's not amenity, which is not value free. And that's the last time you'll hear me say that word. And I hope you stop using it as well. The values and meanings of the things in the environment can be directly perceived without the need for mental interpretations or inferences. So somebody else calling it an amenity doesn't really mean anything to the person who's having the experience, because that affordance has a unity relative to the posture and the behavior of the person being considered. It's the viewer. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And these affordances appear in sets or niches, and it's just what you think it is. It's where the behavior happens, not where they live. The rivers can be looked at it as niche for outdoor recreation through their affordance. And we have an example of the primogenesis of an outdoor recreation activity in New Zealand, provided by Joyce Hamilton, writing a book about her husband, and them standing on the bank of, I think it was the Ohau, it was one of the headwaters of the Waitaki, and recorded him saying this. He was bored. There's nothing to do here, but if I had a boat that could go upriver in this water, that would be something. This is important in terms of thinking about an affordance. It's not objective, it's not subjective, it's both. It strides across that dichotomy of subject to object, because the meaning is invested in the object, and that all exists inside the person. So it's equally a fact of the environment and a fact of the behavior. It's not a probability or a possibility or an option affordance. So we can think about this almost like a joke. There's an angler, a jet boater, and a multisporter standing next to a river, and they're all looking at this river, but they're seeing different things. The jet boater might be looking at that riffle and thinking, can I get across that? And are my mates going to help push me out if I can't? The angler's looking at the pool, perhaps, that the riffle is flowing into. Are there fish there? What's the jet boater going to do when he goes through it? The multi-sport paddler is thinking about it in completely different terms. They're going from one pace to the other, and they're probably, I'm going to stereotype this activity, worried about tipping over, and maybe they're just in the process of getting their grade 2 so they can do the big race, and they're having a much more in-touch experience with the water, perhaps, than the other two. And then up walks a pack rafter. Now the first three are just using small sections of the river. If you think about it in terms of GIS, the angler is a dot. The jet boater would be a short line, but that pack rafter might have walked across into the catchment and put their pack raft onto the WiMAC just as soon as it's deep enough to float. And their goal is to go to the ocean. So this emergent activity has changed the entire use profile of the river without anybody really noticing. So what is a behavior setting, and why is this important? I was going to talk about this quite a lot, but I'm not going to now. These are all behavior settings, and this is a town in Kansas, and this is the 19, and they spent a lot of, this was the heyday of social science. They spent a lot of time standing in corners watching people do stuff in places, and they were able to determine that individual tiny places within a place can be an entirely different behavior setting. So if we take this concept to a river, then we can imagine the river itself. We can imagine the Jeep track that's going from, as the river meanders, it's going from dry patch to dry patch. We can imagine a trail going alongside of it, which is choked with trees currently. We can imagine each of these things as a different behavior setting on the same river, which is the point I was trying to make. And the sinomorph, this is just a word I want you to have, because it's not the dictionary anymore. It's the stuff that goes together to do the thing at the place, my definition. And then the elements of a behavior setting are, it exists in time, people are there, action patterns, behavior mechanisms happen, and then you've also got this concept of power. Okay. So when we watch these four recreationists next to this river, if they're there by themselves or they're there to do their activity, you'd be able to sort of blur your eyes and watch that person go there, or those kinds of folks go there time and time again, and you'll see a standing pattern that is carried out. Kayakers kayak, fishermen fish, and they've got the stuff and the habits and the practices that go along with those that support them, which Rasmus was just talking about as changing over time in relationship to the river itself. Thank you, Rasmus. And that they also have sort of structural components, but they also have dynamic components. And this is about how tight, you think about valence in a physics concept, where certain things are attracted together, some things aren't. This is where evolution happens in recreation ecology. So they want to walk, they want to boat the upper reaches, but they don't want to carry the boat. They find somebody has created a plastic boat that you can easily carry and inflate, and suddenly people are all over the show. Place attachment is about the emotional bond, and they're evaluative ties to a location that reflect the intensity of an emotional attached connection to a place. And the psychological attachment is the identity piece, and dependence is about the ability or not to substitute, go somewhere else. We now have a very lovely 6-item scale that measures this very well. It's been tested in quite a number of places. Then the last pot of data is about the meaning, and these can have a range of different categories you can put them in. The data is very easy to access, and it's about what their activity. The first example I'm going to give of the way this has been used to determine what the meanings are and then perhaps change them is was with the Ramahana Waitua Committee in Greater Wellington Regional Council, where they were trying to determine what the connection is and what that connection means, and then what they should do about it. And one of the conclusions with the management decisions for place-based involved committed recreationists will require consideration of what it is about their activity that arouses feelings of personal relevance, and also to build sense of place among children. So good on them for that. There are far too many examples to talk about of how this is being used globally in terms of how to establish or develop environmentally responsible behavior in parks, to integrate sense of place and planning and management of multifunctional river landscapes in Europe, and then integrating social values with GPS tracks through Denali National Park to determine what's going on with the people who are there. And then sitting on top of this, so Lewicka did a really amazing lit review on this, and then the 44 decades of place attachment research using a variety of existing methods, and we've collected data in those three pots, which have to do with meaning variables. And so what we're able to determine, what we're able to see in terms of these 20 rivers is those differences. There's variation in every one of those components, and sometimes on the same river. We'll just take two of them, and I'm just going to flip through this real quickly. The Dobson and the Opehe, they're very different. The Dobson is world-class, according to the kayakers. The Opehe could be jet boaters, sorry. And the Dobson, yeah, again. It's to take a chainsaw river, so there's some relationship with the place. The WiMAX, so this is a great illustration. I really love seeing that because it illustrates a corridor of affordance concept that I've been working on, where you've got a range of experiences and the fact that this can come down into the conditions on the day. The recreationist is going to make the best of. Let me put it that way, which Perry and Gallo call the flexible recreationist. And this comes through quite clearly in this, in the Waitaki jet boating project. And so when we color out the rest, it really brings this out dramatically, I thought. And this has happened within living memory and beyond. As you all know, in recreation terms, it involves things like hassles, coping, and substitution. Something called a Clayton's uplift, which I won't describe, but it's not a real uplift. People go anyway. And then there's the concept of conditionality of affordance. And when you squeeze those all together, those are different activities. This is what you end up with. So that I meant that to be, yeah. So just to bring this to a close, sense of place is at the heart of NIMBY. It's inextricable from human experience. It's developmental and generational. It's expressed across cultures, layered and multifaceted, durable and malleable. It's a virtual driver of tourism and a direct driver for recreation. And yeah, the important bit about putting this into GIS, I've left out entirely, but I will be publishing that late this year. So I'm going to end it there. Thank you.